Dana from MadeEveryday.com. I love a good party, and sometimes it's fun to have a cute little party skirt. I've shown you guys how to make a simple skirt before, but this one is really gonna amp it up. We're gonna use some sequin fabric. I'm gonna show you how to add a really fun satin lining, and we'll also give it a cute little waistband. Here's what you need. Sequin fabric, satin fabric, 1-inch wide elastic. Now the beauty of this project is that you get to browse the fancy fabric section at the store, which I don't know if that's technically what it's called, but that's what I like to call it. And there's so many different ways that you can make this skirt. Here's a few versions that I've done. This one with some lace with hot pink on the inside, but it's kind of cool how the lace overlay kind of tones down the hot pink a little bit. Here's another one with kind of a chiffon and it has little bumpy dots on it. And then this one that we're going to do today with the sequin. I got all these fabrics at my local Joann Fabric and Craft store. And I'm sure you've walked past this aisle before and thought, what should I make with those? Now you have the perfect project. This is the cool sequin that I found. And I'm just gonna use a silver satin lining to go with it, but you could use a different color lining if you want a little pop of color. Here's some more chiffon. And even, oh, lace, there are so many cool laces out there. I love this, like the skirt here, or like my shirt, it gives just a really cool effect. Okay, so let's grab our fabric and let's start cutting. First, let's take a few measurements so you know what dimensions to cut your skirt. You wanna measure around your waist, or if it's for your child or for a friend, measure on their waist. I'm making this for my daughter, and I actually already measured her. She's 21 inches. So I'm gonna write that down, 21. Then you wanna make your skirt 2 times that, 2.5 times that, 1.5. It just depends on how full you want it to be. I'm gonna do 2.5 times. So 21 times 2.5, 52.5. I'll just say 52. So my width of my skirt is going to be 52 inches. Now for the length, just decide, do you want your skirt to hit at your thigh, down to your knees, measure that. For my daughter, I measured 12. So I'm gonna write that down. Length is 12 inches. And for my outer piece, I'm gonna cut 52 by 12 inches. Now for the lining, let's write that down so I don't forget. Now the lining you want to be a little bit longer than your outer fabric because it's going to fold over, and that's what's gonna create that satin waistband. So add 3.5 inches to that length. So for my width is gonna be the same, 52 inches. My lining is going to be my 12 inches plus 3.5, so 15.5 inches. Okay. Now some fabrics are not going to be 60 inches wide, so it might be hard to get that 52 inches in one single cut. So you might want to cut 2 different pieces, sew them together at both the side seams so you have one large piece. Okay, let's cut our fabric. Now the downside to using these fancy fabrics is that they are kind of a pain in the butt. Just have to say it, it's true. They can be frustrating to work with at times. Sequins flying everywhere and but with hard things comes a good payoff, right? Messes turn into beautiful things. I don't know, there's gotta be some expression out there. So be patient with your project as you're cutting, as you're sewing, and resist cleaning up all these sequins until the end because you'll find them everywhere. Okay, I have cut out my sequin fabric and I laid it on top of my satin fabric so that I can cut it the exact same width because that's really important since it's going to be a lining. But don't forget that we wanna leave 3.5 inches above. So I've kind of measured, and like I said, these are slinky fabrics, so I'm trying to be as precise as I can, but sometimes it's not always possible. Just do your best. That's all we're expecting. Okay, now I'm gonna cut right down, making sure it's not slipping as I cut. Okay, now we're gonna pin these two together and we're gonna sew along this bottom part. So if I'd been smart, I would have turned this the other way to begin with. Let's go just like this. Okay, there we go. Now you can use pins, you can use, my favorite Wonder Clips, those are awesome. Some specialty fabrics you should not put pins into. This part is going to be on the lining, so I'm okay with pinning it, but just, be aware of that on your fabric so that you're not going to create a little run or anything like that in your fabric. Okay, and pinning is important here because otherwise they're gonna slink apart from each other. Okay, let's go to our sewing machine. Make sure you have your right sides of the fabric facing each other. And we are only sewing the hem of the skirt right now. We're kind of doing the project a little bit backwards, but it's kind of cool, I like it. Come over to your machine And remember that when you're working with specialty fabrics, sometimes they can have a tendency to dull your sewing needle. So if you notice that it's snagging or anything like that, change the needle. And when you're done with the project, definitely get a fresh needle. Okay, I am using about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Use whatever seam allowance is comfortable for you. Do a forward and back stitch, and then sew right down. Try to make sure they're staying together. Sometimes that's hard because one fabric can kind of slip down. Just do your best. And if you find that one is slipping, like mine is kind of right now, I just keep kind of adjusting it as I go down. And we can trim off any excess when we're done to make sure that they are the exact same length. Okay, I made it to the end, and as you can see, my fabric has significantly shifted on me, but that's okay. We're gonna trim off that excess, and then we'll pin the sides and sew those together. So you can see here how this has shifted off. And part of that is because this is a knit and this is a woven, and so this was stretching just slightly, but you know what, that's okay. These kind of fabrics are sort of that way, and you have good make it work moments. So I'm just trimming this down. Then we're gonna fold this whole thing in half, like so, with right sides together. Okay, and then I'm gonna pin this in place, and then we're gonna go back to our machine and sew the side seam. Okay, we are going to sew one big side seam, sewing all these fabrics together. So come back to your machine. I'm using a 3/8 inch seam allowance again. Forward and back stitch. And just go all the way down. Okay, I'm done with the seam. Now we're gonna go to our iron and we're gonna press the lining and turn it into our waistband. Now turn your fabric right side out. And if you want, you could press this seam right here. I kind of like how mine looks because it will kind of give it this sort of bubble effect. So just do whichever you prefer. And remember that when you're using fancy fabrics that you want to do a test first to make sure that nothing will melt under your iron or anything like that. Okay, now I am pulling the fabric back into my skirt so that you can see the extra that we're going to use for our waistband. Okay, I told you these were a pain in the butt to work with, but I promise it'll be worth it. Right? Okay. There we go. That looks really awesome. Okay, you can see how our fabric is hanging out the top here. That's exactly what we want. Now before we press our waistband in place, I am going to make sure everything looks good, first of all. Pull this down a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna place a few pins around just to hold this part of the skirt together while I'm working with this up here so that things don't continue to shift around. That will really help a lot. So I'm just gonna pin this in a few spots. Okay, let's do a couple more over here. And if your lining is slightly bigger than the skirt, that will work out because it's going to have a gathered waistband, so you won't notice that very much. Okay, now that that is pinned together, we're gonna pull our iron over here. And we want to press this under first 1/2 inch. And we're actually not press it under, press it over, I guess. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this. You can be precise if you want to, but just be consistent around the whole skirt. Okay, now that I've pressed that over 1/2 inch, we are going to slink this over and pull it down to the top of our fabric here to create that waistband that the elastic is going to go through. So, you just need it to be big enough to get 1 inch wide elastic through, which this will be plenty big. In fact, I could probably do 1.5 inch wide elastic. You definitely have some wiggle room here. And once I do that, I'm going to pin this in place too. so that everything stays in place as I'm going around. Okay, keep shifting this and moving around. It really does help having these extra pins here because now the whole skirt isn't stretching and moving as I go. Okay, I'm back to the beginning point here. Now before we sew, I want to mark an in and an out point for our elastic. So let's find our side seam here and just decide what's the front and what's the back. I mean, on this fabric it doesn't matter, but you can decide that for yourself. So I'm gonna make a little opening in the back and I'm gonna mark that with double pins just so I remember, start here, stop there, because you need to leave an opening for elastic to come in and out. So I'm just gonna go right like this. Okay, and now we're ready to go back to our machine. Okay, I'm gonna start right at our beginning point here. And I'm sewing about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of my fabric. There we go. Do a forward and back stitch at the beginning. And then sew around. It's really nice that the lining also creates the waistband. I just think that is a really comfortable thing for someone. It wouldn't be very nice to have sequin fabric tucked into you, so this satin makes it perfect. Okay, I am back around to my stop point. I'm gonna do another back stitch. Pull out any of these extra pins that are here. And then it's always nice when you're sewing to do a little quality control inspection. Just make sure that everything's sewed through and that if you somehow missed a spot, go back and fix that. But I think this looks good. Okay, I have my elastic here, which I cut 21 inches, the same size as my daughter's waist. And I have 2 safety pins here. I'm gonna take this large one and put it right on the end of the elastic. And the small one we'll use in a second. Now we're gonna go into that opening that we left. Take the elastic and go right inside here. And then you're just going to string this all the way around. The safety pin will help you get through and shift it down. You just kind of gather it and then move the fabric down and just keep going. Okay, shift it down until you can get to the end of the elastic, and then we want to secure that in place with the other safety pin. And it's important to do that, even when I think, no way, I'm totally not gonna pull it through. I always pull it through and then I have to redo it. So the skirt is smarter than you. Okay, let's pin this in place here. My daughter Clara is gonna love this skirt. She saw the fabric before I started sewing and was like, ew, what are you making? So then we'll have to figure out what kind of shirt she's gonna wear with this, but that will be part of the fun too. Okay, keep going. It's looking cute already. If you find that your waistband feels too wide for your elastic, next time, or you could trim a little bit of that down, just, you know, some people like a really tight width on their waistband, but I like to have a little bit of wiggle room, so make it work for you. Okay, look, I'm back at this beginning point. So pull that out. Make sure nothing is twisted inside before we sew the ends of the elastic together. Take this one out and let me pull these out so you can see. There we go. There's our 2 ends of the elastic. Now, if my daughter was here, sometimes I like to try this on her before I actually sew everything closed, but she is not. So I'm gonna sew these closed. If for any reason I didn't do that correctly, you can always take it out and fix it. Okay, back to your machine. Okay, I have my elastic overlapping about, I don't know, 1 inch. I'm gonna sew with a zigzag stitch. Just a couple of times back and forth. This will just hold it in place. And you know, as your daughter grows, or if you grow out of your skirt, you can always take this elastic out and add slightly bigger elastic. So don't worry if you ever want to change that. Okay, that's pretty much done. Now we just need to sew this opening closed. So go back to a standard stitch, forward and back stitch right on top of the line where you ended. And then pull this taut or straight and sew that opening closed. Okay, let's see how it looks. And there we go. Oh my gosh, that is so cute. Clara is going to love this. Now we just need to find some more fancy to go. For more ideas and tutorials, check out my website, madeeveryday.com. And for all of your fancy fabrics, sewing, and craft needs, head to Joanne Fabric and Craft or check out joanne.com. I will see you guys next time. Bye.